really, really happy to have Juliane Sempionatto here today. Her expertise is in developing wearable electrochemical sensors to monitor medical relevant biomarkers in sweat, saliva, tears, and interstitial fluids. She is currently a postdoctoral researcher at Caltech in Prof. Weigau's lab. She received her PhD in nanoengineering at UCSD, working with Dr. Joseph Yang. She's the recipient of a prestigious Siebel Scholar Award, an IUPAC Young Chemist Award, and the MIT 35 under 35 Latin America Award. So without further ado, it's all yours.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction. I want just to share that I'm super happy to be here for the invitation and everything. And today I'm going to talk with you a little bit, actually it's actually a bit of my research that I do with wearables for health monitoring. When we think about wearables, usually, oh man, see, not working. Oh, why? Okay, usually these are the type of devices that comes into mind, right? Here? More. Cool. Now we can start. When we think about wearables, usually these are the type of devices that comes into mind. I think not now, but early in the day, they were mostly related with counting steps, counting heartbeat. But if you look now, the features that they can measure in real time and continuously, you can see that they are very important for healthcare telemedicine. Actually, there are some doctors that they send the patient out with a Fitbit for recovery, for example, for see if they are being active or not, and how the process outside the hospital is going on, right? They are getting better and better, but there is still a type of information that is missing. They cannot have information at a molecular level, physiological information. If you want to know this, nowadays, what we have to do would be probably to buy one of these devices or all of them. They are pretty great for monitoring our health from home, but I would say that they are a little bit at the expensive side, especially for developing countries where I came from. I'm from Brazil, right? My grandma, she had type 2 diabetes, and for her to get those strips was super, super hard. We ended up losing her for the disease because of bad monitoring, of the diabetes. So I would say that right now, people need to do accessible healthcare for everybody, right? Another downside that we have with these devices is that they cannot monitor your parameters in a continuous fashion. It's just a single point on time. If you want to do continuous, you're going to have to be I don't know, every 2 minutes. So for making continuous monitoring, we do have to have something non-invasive. And this is my job. I want to combine all of these sensors into one single platform that you wear on your skin. And you can have the same type of information that you have on your body from other non-invasive biofluids. What's happening again? Sorry. Yeah. So we can do that. We can have the same type of information that we have in blood just by looking into tears, sweat, and saliva, right? You might ask, why I would want to monitor, for example, my uric acid level, my lactate level if I'm not sick? What is the advantage, right? And then I would just tell you that by monitoring this type of analytes in a continuous way, you can do prevention, preventing disease of ever happening. Metabolic syndrome is a reality today, right? 1 in every 3 people in the world, they have metabolic syndrome. It is characterized by obesity, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, high triglycerides. It sounds too familiar, right? Everybody knows someone that has all of these conditions and symptoms. If left untreated, it can lead to heart attack, stroke, all these fatal disease. And then I can tell you, if you had a device that could tell you, hey, your glucose levels, they're not getting down as fast as they used to, or your blood pressure is getting higher and higher with time. You could take some action, intervention, to prevent this disease for progression, right? And then also, if you ask me about wearables, I would say that in the near future, they're not going to be able to just do prevention, but also prediction. Imagine if we could tell within hours, days, that someone is going to have a stroke. How many lives we could save? How many immediate care we could have? What if I told you that tomorrow or in 2 hours, you are going to be having a heart attack? What would you do? Wouldn't be better to know? Especially for people who suffer from epilepsy, for example. They do have these seizures all the time. They're not predictable, but they could be. If you have enough information about their health and how the disease progresses, you could use heavy machine learning to do prediction. Oh, this parameter is getting close to another seizure, so be aware, right? So these are my vision in the future, where wearables are going to be able to tell us this type of information. Right now, today, I'm going to be talking with you only about sweat. It's just like a simple sample of what I've been working with. And then these are the work I've been doing during my PhD at UCSD. It was a very productive PhD. We had 2 patents that were licensed to a company. They are trying to commercialize this type of sweat sensors. Just to give you a quick peek, these eyeglasses here, it was actually the very first one that I did myself, my wearable sensor. It has the sensors here in the nose pad. It's for sweat during exercise. We are going to talk about this one later on. This ECG plus lactate is for high performance athletes. And I have also been working with glucose a lot, glucose in the interstitial fluid and alcohol. So this is just a peek on how the sensor looks like. And for making them to be low cost, we need to pay a lot of attention on how we are going to make them, right? So fabrication is important. I'm working with electrochemical sensors. I build the sensor from scratch. The substrate, the electrode, I have to fabricate it myself. So what I do is using this type of printing techniques. In this case, the screen printing technique. It's pretty close to silk, if you know, a silking shirt, where you have the stencil, you have the ink, and then you can overlap them to build your design. It leads to a very mass production numbers, and then the design, you can do whatever you need. The ink formulation also, you can use nanoparticles, you can use graphene, everything to make the sensor more conductive, which is going to give you higher sensitivity. Another type of technique is this inkjet. It's very similar to the printer that we have in the office, right? And then the nice thing about this technique is that it can do very fine patterns, around 10 micrometers resolution. And the ink that we are using here is based in water. So we can actually mix the bioproteins, the biomolecules in the ink and print at once. Gives us more stability for the sensing. Now that we have the sensor, we are going to have a look on how the detection actually happens. Working with wearables is very tricky because for sweat, for example, is a very complex biofluid, meaning that you have many types of molecules over there, but you are interested in only one. You do not take the sample out to do sample treatment. You have to have the selectivity there on site, on the body. So when we are interested in measuring one target analyte, for metabolites, usually we are employing enzymes. Enzymes are proteins that they fold in a very specific way that only the substrate that has the right shape can interact with it. When the substrate meets the enzyme, some chemical bonds are broken, releasing electrons that we can actually measure. The intensity of the current that we are measuring is proportional to the concentration of the analyte inside of the biofluid. This is the basic like a principle of how a biosensor works, right? But for example, if the molecule has the wrong shape, it will not fit, and then you don't have any signal. So this is how you have selectivity on the site, on body, right? The type of immobilization that we are using is mostly by entrapment. We are using some biocompatible polymers to glue the enzyme to the sensor. These are pretty common and low cost. You can actually use the printer to print your enzyme on top of the sensor. The only bad thing I would say about the enzyme is that we don't have enzyme for everything. It would be great if you have like one enzyme for every molecule we want to measure. So what we can do is to build up our own detection system. Here we are using kind of a molecular imprinted polymers. We are using the target analyte, the molecule we want, as a template. We polymerize the polymer on top of the surface, and then we remove the template. And then you can see here, the detection is pretty much like the enzyme we just saw. Only the right shape can interact with these cavities. And then this is the approach we're using for big molecules that have like very high hydrophobicity, that we don't have one enzyme for interacting with this type of substrate. So with this, we were able to do actually one sensor for every types of amino acids that we have in the body. It was pretty cool. And the applications that I'm gonna tell a little bit later. What if you wanna measure something very small? For example, these electrolytes, they are small charged molecules. They're too small for the enzymes. So we have to use another approach, which is building, for example, these ion selective membranes. We made these membranes out of these molecules over here, so that the cavity that we see has the size and the charge specifically for the ion. In this case, I'm showing valinomycin, which is very specific for potassium. So only the ion with the right size and the right charge can interact with the sensor. Because we are setting charges on top of the surface, we can actually measure the difference of potential against another reference electrode. And if the biofluid has another ions which are too big or too small, there's no interaction. So with this, we saw how we make the fabrication of the sensor, and also how do we sense the molecules we want without taking the sample to the lab and doing specific sample treatments, right? These two basic approaches. Now we are going to finally see how are the applications that we can do with sweat. Did you know that we have different types of sweat? We have sweat that we do, for example, while exercising. That is the most commonly one. I can make you sweat without you lifting one finger with some drug that can stimulate sweat. This is pretty useful for patients in the hospital setting. And there is the third type of sweating, which is passive sweating that we have in our hands, for example, all the time. So I'm going to show you an example of sensors for each type of sweat. When I just started working with wearables, these are the type of devices that were out there. They could be like on the skin, like a tattoo. They could be printed on the clothes that are pretty close to our body, or they could be in this flexible substrate, like a wristband. And then all of them, I noticed there was some challenging part of old sweat mixing up with the new sweat. What we would see is that the signal would increase, but when we were expecting to see actually decrease, it would continue growing. The mixing of sweat was not allowing the sensor to decrease the signal when it should. So what I did was to put the electrochemical sensor inside of this microfluidic device. With this, we could have continuous flow of sweat on top of the detector, and then it would be protected inside of this epidermal microfluidic. This was one of the the projects that were licensed for a company. They call it InnovaSense. They are setting up actually a huge fabrication for this prototype in Sweden. And then it's kind of like very proud my baby's growing and going out in the world. Yeah, this is what I'm showing to you. The basic idea of using this type of microfluidics, you see here in those inlets, the sweat comes inside, and the sweat gland itself works as a pump. So it's pumping sweat all the time inside of the microfluidic device, on top of the detector, and through the outlet. Here you can see we use like a dye to better see how the sweat is flowing. With this application, we were able to measure hydration during exercise. You can see here in this part, it was the volunteer was doing intense exercising without consuming any type of drink or energy drink. And then you can see here that the potassium and sodium concentrations that we were measuring like together, they increase. That happens because the body does not have time to absorb back the ions. So when you are sweating too much, you're losing lots of liquid. You're sending out all the electrolytes and your body cannot reabsorb it. So this leads to dehydration that can lead to lots of other complications. And on the other hand, when you do exercising by hydrating a lot, you can see actually here the concentration of the ions decreasing. This type of approach was very interesting to work. We were working with Gatorade. They wanted to see what are the ions that would decrease faster, so they could formulate the energy drink better to the type of person and also to the type of exercising we are doing. It is great platform for analyzing athletes and high performance, but you do need to exercise for getting the sweat. What about the patients? What about they are too sick for doing exercise? How do we do, right? So this is why we came up with this other approach, that is sweat stimulation by using a technique called iontophoresis. Iontophoresis is used right now for as a standard protocol for detecting cystic fibrosis in babies. Babies, they can use the same FDA-approved technique. The way it works is that we need two sensors, one anode and one cathode, and in between the sensors, between the sensor and the skin, there is this hydrogel. The hydrogel is loaded with the drug that is gonna stimulate the sweat, and then once you apply a mild current between these two sensors, you're gonna build up some charges. In this side here, where we have positive charges, because pilocarpine is positively charged always, when it gets like a positive charges in the sensor, it gets repelled and delivered right inside the skin. It stimulates the sweat glands, and then you sweat locally, not in the whole body. Here you can see before and after doing the stimulation. So this approach was pretty good for the hospital settings. Now we could make the patient sweat for as long as we want. It's just doing another dosage, and then you can continue sweat for, I don't know, like from 1 to 4 hours. Is a pretty good approach for the hospital setting, and we were able to measure using this sensor. During 3 hours, we were monitoring sweat after intake of vitamin C. We saw when is the peakest concentration in the body by stimulating sweat, and then when we would decrease. It's kind of the pharmacological profile of vitamin C. It is super important to have the pharmacological profile of a drug if you want to do precise medicine, personalized medication, right? We show the same approach for the pharmacological profile for patients who has Parkinson. When they have Parkinson, they take a drug called L-DOPA or levodopa, which has super narrow therapeutic range. That means that if you go under the dosage necessary for treating the disease, nothing happens and you don't have the benefits of the treatment. And then if you go a little bit up, you're going to have very serious bad side effects. The way it's done today is by trial and error. The patient goes to the doctor, and then it says that, oh, I'm having very bad side effects, and then it decreases the dosage. And then it goes back and forth until you can find the drug. But the thing is, within time using this drug, the pharmacokinetic range decreases a lot. So you have to do this constantly, this back and forth to the doctor, right? But with this approach, if you can have the pharmacological profile all the time, you know exactly when to take the next dosage. And this depends a lot on the people, depends a lot on the type of a drug that you're taking. In this case, was a low concentration of L-DOPA here. And we did a very nice collaboration with Dr. Irene in the UCSD Hospital Center. To get this data with the patients, we were using this platform over here. Oh. We were getting sweat from the finger of the patients. It was super cool. It was super easy, you know, non-invasive and pretty fast. The way we did that was by designing a very simple prototyping, and the mainly hard work was to design the hydrogel for collecting enough sweat, very porous hydrogel that doesn't dry, let's say, and then it maintains continued dilution of your sweat, let's say. So you can actually control how much sweat you're collecting. We tested this platform for Parkinson, as we just saw, and also for glucose. We monitor the glucose levels during the whole day of several patients. I'm just showing you one here. And then it correlates super well with the blood glucose that we were also monitoring at the same time. This same platform was used to measure cortisol levels. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and then it gets pretty high concentration during the morning, decreasing its concentration during the afternoon. Knowing the concentration of cortisol allow us to assess, for example, if someone is stressed or not. This was a collaboration with people from JPL. JPL is part of NASA program. They were very interested in this for the astronauts. So they undergo a lot of stress, and then if they are not at highest performance, it's pretty bad for them because they're in outer space. Right? So we need to monitor their health closely. This was pretty cool work as well. We can see here in these hatched bars, these are the concentrations of cortisol measured with a standard technique called ELISA that uses antibody. And the solid bars was using our sensor. So they were pretty close together, right? So this type of platform is actually a platform. It can be applied for any type of analysis that you can find in sweat. It is not only good for sensing, but also for harvesting energy from sweat. Did you know that we can have energy from sweat? When we are working with wearable biosensors for sweat, having the power system is actually pretty tricky because we need some batteries that are conformal to the skin, and they should last a very long time, right? To be able to do continuous monitoring. So when people use this sweat to harvest energy, usually they have to do exercising or sweat stimulation that we just saw. In these two types of approach, you are having to put some input of energy. If you're exercising, you are like wasting energy just because you're exercising. That is the point for someone. And if you're doing iontophoresis, you do need to put energy for stimulate the sweat, find the voltage, right? In this case, the input of energy is 0. And then how can we harvest energy from sweat? We use this system that is called biofuel cell. The sweat is the fuel. What we are doing here is using a cathode and an anode. On the anode, spontaneous reaction needs to happen. In this case, is the chemical bond of lactate is being broken by the enzyme. When the chemical bond breaks, we have the release of the electron, right? And this is spontaneous. If combined with the cathode, for example, which has like the reduction of oxygen over the platinum sensor, this is actually also a spontaneous reaction. We can have like external flow of electrons that we can harvest to use and power our devices. I like to say when I'm explaining biofuel cell, that is pretty much like the potato or lemon battery that we do in school, and then we are the potato. And then we can harvest energy from there. what we demonstrated here is that you can harvest energy without any inputs of like exercising during the whole day while you are working, and also while you're sleeping. This is the whole grail of energy, actually. Even though the power that we are harvesting is not so high, we can store it in capacitors and use it on the day. So this is a pretty cool technique for powering the sensors. And then just to tell more about this type of idea of harvesting energy from sweat, from the finger, imagine if this platform is combined with the oximeter sensor, right? So we can harvest any type of molecular information of patients in the intensive care while monitoring the whole bunch of other parameters. If you want to know their information in blood, even though you are in the hospital, you still need to draw blood and send to the lab. The lab is like overflow with testing to do, and then you can have this very fast screening prototype approach for the patients. It will be great as well.
Comment on with the simultaneously sense this even include its process, right?
Yeah, that can be done. Yeah, for example,
just for the sake of the 70 people online, can you repeat the question?
Oh, of course. The question is if we can have harvesting of power and sensing at the same time, right? So this is ideally what happens. We have two sets of sensors. Usually one is harvesting energy while powering the wearable sensor. So you have two different systems that are connected to wires. The same way that you would plug a battery on your watch, you plug a biofuel cell on your sensor. So it just works as a battery. And then the nice thing is that like a fuel cell is renewable, a battery is not. Fuel cell is renewable because you have new sweat all the time. Even if you have depletion of the analyte, you have new sweat, and then you have new analyte, and then you have constant power. And then the idea is to have them working at the same time. Yep, that was a very good question.
And then these longevity just on this, like, and then the two things connected to your body. Essentially, if you interact with them, how long these contacts are.
Yeah. Yeah, this is general for any type of wearables we are talking with, right? How long they would last on the body. And then because we are using enzymes and other biomolecules, the time that they are going to be working is totally related to the time of stability of your biorecognition rate. There are enzymes such as glucose that are pretty great. They can work for over 12 hours that we can see. So these are pretty low cost. The idea is that you can wear one of those per day. You know, instead of using, for example, 7 to 8 blood strips for measuring your glucose, you have type 1 diabetes, for example, use one patch a day, and then the cost is around like tenths of cents for production.
Thing, what we always see is basically the patch.
Yes.
There's no reader involved.
Yeah.
Which is where the big part is.
Yeah, the reader is we have the circuit that is sending the information wireless to a cell phone, for example. So we do have to have external reader. If you were like a colorimetric sensor, you could just look and see. But colorimetric sensor does not have the same type of sensitivity as an electrochemical one. And then your eyes cannot tell so many intensities of color. Yeah. But those are, communication is a pretty big thing for wearables, because if it is inside your body, having the signal out is very tricky, right? So far, excuse me. Also, another approach for having energy is to use solar batteries. So you don't have to exercise, you don't have to stimulate your sweat. You just use energy from like the sunlight. In this work, in particularly, we were doing a type of solar cell with our collaborator that harvest energy from the indoor light. If you are inside this room right now, wearing this device, you could stimulate your sweat. It was able to power the ionophores and also continually measure the analytes. So this was a pretty cool approach because it could also work indoors. We tested the detection of glucose, pH, and sodium during 12 hours that I just told you, right? So the enzyme glucose, it's pretty resilient. it can last for a long time, and then it can work. We were measuring these analytes in different light intensities, and with a pretty cool continuous. The package of Bluetooth that we are receiving was like pretty big, like and frequent in time. Cool. So far, we saw sensors that can measure single analytes or multiple analytes. But remember what I said in the beginning, that the more comprehensive information that we would have is if we combine those with these commercial wearables. If we are able to measure like chemical parameters and physical parameters at the same time, would be the best scenario, right? And this is what we did here with this work. With this single device, we were able to track blood pressure levels, heart rate, and also metabolite information. Remember that I was just telling you about cardiometabolic disorder? Measuring the blood pressure, glucose, and other metabolites is very important for you to have control of your cardiometabolic syndrome. If you want to have the same information that this device can give you, today, you would go out of the doctor's office wearing one of these for the blood pressure. If you are like have a elevated reading in the office of the doctor, he's gonna send you home with one of these. And then he's gonna take a measurement of your blood pressure during the whole day. And every time he takes a measurement, you have to hold still while it's measured, right? And if you wanna measure at the same time your heart ECG, you need to wear even more wires during the whole day and night, because you need to sleep with those. And the chemical information of metabolites, forget about real time. No, you're gonna have the results like in months, or weeks. With this single device, we were able to measure the blood pressure and metabolite information, plus the heart rate, all at the same time, in real time, and continuously. The blood pressure was measured using these piezoelectric transducers. When we apply voltage on them, they can actually send ultrasound 4 centimeters down your skin, and then you can actually measure the opening and close of the artery while the blood is flowing. This change of area can translate back into the blood pressure. And we were also measuring metabolites in 2 different biofluids, sweat and interstitial fluid. The things that we were measuring were like a glucose, alcohol, lactate, and caffeine. All of these things, they can change your blood pressure. And I'm sure like most of people didn't know that. If you have hypertension and then you are drinking like lots of alcohol, you might all of a sudden have like a heart attack or something. It's not sudden, you know. If you had the sensor, you would know that your blood pressure is increasing with the number of glasses you're taking. So this is important for monitoring prevention of cardiometabolic syndrome. Here, I'm just gonna explain you how to measure information in the interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid is the fluid that is surrounding all of the cells. It is right underneath our skin. And then the way that people get information from interstitial fluid right now is either by putting like a needle on the epidermis or using microneedles. This technique that I'm gonna show is non-invasive, right? We just saw how to stimulate sweat. We have here applied very mild current, delivering the drug and stimulate sweat. But what I didn't tell you is that when you build up these charges on the sensor, all the molecules that makes part of the ISF, the interstitial fluid, the negative ones is gonna migrate to the anode side because it's charged positively. And the positive molecules of the ISF is gonna migrate to the other side. So it's super cool. Like you have this flow of interstitial fluid right underneath your skin when you're wearing this device. Because the skin is already negatively charged naturally, we have more negative charges on this side than we have on the positives on the other one. That creates a net flow of interstitial fluid in this direction. So everything that has no charges, including glucose, is gonna be pulled out here on this cathode side.
So this is how we can measure sweat and interstitial fluid at the same time. This is very good for example, for redundancy. If you want to make sure that concentration you are measuring, just use 2 different biofluids. If you are seeing the same thing, then you're good. But in this case, we are measuring like alcohol in sweat, alcohol, caffeine, and vitamin C. And in the other side, we are measuring glucose. Glucose correlation is much better in the interstitial fluid than with sweat. Here is the sensor operating, for example, when you do sweat stimulation and ion selective extraction at the same time. It is still with the big wires because the equipment that we need to read the blood pressure is it's very big. It just doesn't exist a smaller one that we can integrate with the sensor. And we can use the same platform during exercise. Just showing you like how we actually do the setup of measurements in the lab. Right? And now, the type of signal that we are gonna get looks like this. In this case, we are measuring lactate in sweat simultaneously with the blood pressure. So you can see when the lactate levels increases, also the blood pressure and heart rate increases. And the nice thing that we saw during this type of setup is that the blood pressure that you measured after during exercise is slightly lower than before. So this helps a lot people who has hypertension to decrease their blood pressure and to manage without taking a lot of medication. So you just do like more exercising. And then on the other hand, we were testing the stimulation of sweat and interstitial fluid at the same time. So we just had like a meal of rich in glucose with alcohol at the same time. And then you can see here that the blood pressure did increase. For all the people that we tested, blood pressure increased with alcohol and glucose, even if they were healthy. Now, I was just telling you, imagine if your blood pressure is already high. That is dangerous, right? And then this is why you need to monitor closely.
In all these experiments, could you also comment, just out of curiosity, what is the ground truth you use to benchmark the?
Of course. Here you can see all the sensors that the system have. Everything that we're able to do a commercial one, what people are using today, we did to confirm the data. And then you can see here the bar plots, what we measured, what they measured, and then we're pretty close together. Oh, and interestingly, here is the caffeine data. If you are not used to have coffee too much, you feel like you have like a heart rate increases, right? And then you feel all agitated, and your blood pressure increases too. If any people goes to the doctor to have their blood pressure taken, and they have like some coffee before, it's gonna be alterated. So this actually influences a lot the wrong diagnosis of blood pressure.
One more question. Like many of the these smartwatches stuff have motion artifacts because they're optical.
Yes.
Are there similar things also part of this?
Yes. We do definitely have, if you're doing an intense exercise, for example, but it's much less because it's in close contact with your skin. And then we are using parts of the body that does not move a lot. You know, if you put the sensor here in the arm doesn't bend. So this is also some type of consideration of location, where you're gonna place your sensor. But we do have, because I think right now it's just because we are using the wires. When you have everything integrated, then the decreases a lot, the noise. Cool. So, yes.
The piezo transistors, the transducers that you're using, are you able to fabricate those in the same way that you were describing, or is it?
Oh, that one is commercial. We just, depending on the thickness and then how you cut, the geometry is how deep the signal is gonna go deep. But that one is commercial. Yeah. The trickiest part was how to integrate these quite rigid piezo transducers with the very flexible platform that we had. So there were a lot of technology in how to glue them together so they wouldn't like just pop out. Nice. So nowadays, during my postdoc, what I'm doing is to try to implement more sensors into this platform. So, oh, okay, cool. Like, for example, more triglyceride sensors and cholesterol sensors. These are not measured in sweat at all. So it's very tricky to do the detection. We've been having very good preliminary data. working closely with the UCLA hospital. The idea is to measure different diets and how they influence in the cardiometabolic syndrome. We're almost there. We have 10 minutes, right? So we saw just now, as I said, a little bit of what wearables can do. I have worked with saliva by putting the glucose sensor into the pacifier for babies, toddlers who have type 1 diabetes. I know that we have the continuous monitoring of glucose, but it's still a little bit invasive, right? What I like most about this type of research is that we can see the application changing the patient's life, making it better, right? It's a very like a public health issue to eliminate this type of disease. And everything that I showed, I could not do by myself. So we need a huge team for implementing this type of sensors. And right now, what I want in the next step is have data analysis to be able to do the prediction that we are talking about. And this type of information is just not available. If you're not using this type of biosensors, you cannot have the continuous information that I just showed you, right? So I'm mainly interested in 3 areas of research in the future, is using, for example, biomarkers or wearable biosensors as a tool. I say that in the future, you're not going to have to monitor a target analyte, as we saw before, but you're going to have a target analysis. What that means is that you're going to monitor a bunch of parameters, and then you're going to have the disease signature, the disease barcode. I'll give you an example. For example, for assessing stress, you have mainly a questionnaire that you have to fill up, right? But with biosensors, you can actually measure. When you have stress, your brain is going to tell your body to produce a lot of these stress hormones that are going to change your heartbeat, and that is going to inhibit the production of insulin, for example. And also it's going to make you sweat. And then we can find all these alterations in the metabolites of your body in sweat. So if you are able to measure metabolites, electrolytes, and all these parameters together, you can do machine learning to do things like say if you are stressed or not, how much you're stressed, and what is the type of stress. That could replace the questionnaire and then put a much more precise analysis in this type of mental health issues. The sensor would look just like this. Here we can see maybe probably more than 10 sensors into one single platform, and they are about this size over here. I didn't put the scale, sorry. We can only do this type of analysis if you have like good tools. Right now, the tools that we have for detection is not much. It could feel like in a handful, right? We have antibodies, we have enzymes, DNA, and molecular imprinted techniques to use. But this needs like, if you're using antibody, is a single time detection because this interaction here is irreversible. So it needs a lot of study on how to make this chemical reaction reversible, so it is available for having continuous and real-time monitoring. So this is one of my background is chemistry, actually. So I'm investing heavily now in studying new transduction. If we have better tools, then we can monitor drug precise medicine closely. A simple example, we are building up super bacteria because we just put a lot of antibiotics in the patients, right? And monitoring their concentration would help a lot also to decrease, to improve the outcome of the treatment. And then lastly, I'm interested in nutrition. We've been talking a lot about cardiometabolic disorder. It's all related with lifestyle, what you eat. Whatever you eat is correlated with how you are gonna age, how your cells are gonna age. If you monitor nutrition, you can actually prevent cancers from happening. There are a couple of molecules that from nutrition that is already correlated with some type of cancers, right? So I do believe that in the future, we are not gonna have like lung cancer or pancreatic cancer. You're gonna have the cancer defined by the molecule. You have like nitrogen deficient cancer, you know, you're gonna have vitamin deficient cancer. And to do this type of sensors, I already told that it is a lot of hands on deck, but the good thing is there is a lot of people willing to help. There is a lot of resources to reach. There's a lot of collaborations to do. So with this, I just want to thank you so much for getting up with me. And thank you for your time. How we are on time? It's good.
Thank you, Juliane. Maybe we can start with a few audience questions. And for those of you who are in Zoom, if you type up your questions, I will read them out for Juliane. You can ignore the Zoom chat. I'll follow it and ask the questions out for you, Juliane. So, do you want to start with any audience questions here? Yes, ma'am.
So I noticed that when you showed the measurements you're taking in lab, you have this attached to a ribbon table because you said that the machine's not small enough. What is the roadmap getting higher into the wearable?
Oh, coming into rice. We have so many great people that can make this type of devices small. I would say that the limitation where I was to having people that are able to put like some effort in doing that. You know, we have all the tools. We just need people doing that. It's not impossible. I've been talking with a lot of people that already told me that if that is possible, it just needs to get attention from people. If I can tell you that this is important, these are gonna bring you like lots of benefits, then I can bring people to on board and then make the machine smaller, for example. Yep. Good question. Like, yeah, we didn't reverse that. Huh? Thank you. Okay, can we go to the first one? How to measure the heart rate? The heart rate, we can reach measure actually the two ways. We can just use very it's just basically two sensors with a gap underneath, and then it has very sensitive capacitance. So when they are close or further apart, the capacitance changes. So you can just place here on your artery, for example, you're measuring here from the carotid. And then when it closes, like this, it compresses the sensor or gone. I don't know if you get the idea. Like you can have like the blood vein here pulsing, and the sensor on top. These sensors are going to be close together or further apart, close together or further apart. So this is how you measure the pulse. The other way is we can calculate from the blood pressure measure. So every cycle that you see is correlated with your heart rate. It's just like the distance between the things. So we can calculate. You can use this capacitance sensor, or you can use a very small commercial sensor. The next question. Would you measure the correlation of now with the commercial devices like the blood pressure and the metabolites? Yeah. I think I have a slide for that. Oh, we cannot see the screen anymore? Why? No? Well, and I can just talk, but the slide was super cool. Oh man, I prepared backup slides. I want to use them. So when we are doing sweat analysis, what we do first collection of sweat without any sensor or anything. You just stimulate your sweat and then you sample it with time. And then you also sample blood at the same time that you are sampling sweat. And then you can use big machines such as mass spectroscopy or even ELISA. These are cool. Oops. No? Oh. Let me just find the slide first then. Okay.
And just put in presentation mode.
Nice. Yeah. So these are the commercial machine. These are what they are using in the hospital for cystic fibrosis, for example. So, yeah, as I told you, you just do collection. You can see here, the sweat is gonna be filling up. Can you see? The tip is going up and up. So you can do collection of sweat within different times, and then blood at the same time. And then what you're gonna have next is several samples of sweat and blood that you send to the big equipment, and then you can tell exactly how much there is in sweat, how much there is in blood. And then after doing that, you just compare with the signal that you're seeing on the sensor. So for all of the sensors that we saw, this is the standard protocol for validation. Is it correlating with the blood? Is it correlating with the other measurement that I'm doing with the big instrument? So yeah, that's a good question.
Is there a validation? No, sorry, not validation. Calibration needed per participant, or is it universal?
That is difficult and depends a lot of the analyte. Also, people have different types of sweat. Composition of sweat from you and me is different, especially pH. pH can interfere a little bit with the readings, but what we do, we have the enzyme sensor. We have together all the time, like pH sensor, temperature sensor, everything that can change the signal. We are doing real-time calibration. But we do have to do. That's a good question.
There's a question from Vivek Bhuminagan online. Does sweat have common bioinformation all over the body, or are there location-specific things about sweat where you need to pay attention to where the sensor is?
Yes. We have different types of composition depending on the location, because we have different types of sweat glands that I didn't tell. Like, we have the eccrine that we saw. We have also the sebaceous gland. So if you put the sensor on your body here, you're gonna have mostly clear sweat. But if you put on your back, I don't know if you realize or if you ever noticed, the sweat is quite white. It's not as clear as the other part. Sometimes in the face as well, you have like white-ish sweat. So you have there more fatty, cholesterol. Cholesterol I'm measuring from the white sweat, by the way. So yeah, it does depend on the location because you have different types of sweat glands. Cool, that's a good question.
And Shipra asks, nice talk. Have you thought about utilizing artificial antibodies to make it a more universal biosensing strategy?
Yeah, I'm really looking into it. Like they are called nanobodies. So we have the antibodies that are these huge molecules, but what we need is actually a small part. And then all this huge part is very bad for electrochemical sensing. You're kind of blocking the sensor that you just did. So yeah, amazing question. I'm working on studying nanobodies and also nanozymes.
And one last question online is there a way to make the biosensor perspire so that you can cycle through the sweat in the biosensor?
The biosensor perspire? What?
Like to remove the old sweat and so how do you, so I think you talked about the mixing problem of old sweat with new sweat.
Yes.
The question is, how do you help with the cycling through?
Yeah, maybe it's easier if I show you another slide that I have. For example, I told you that we can have this renewal of sweat if we have the microfluidics during exercise, right? And then we can also have the same type. Yes, I'm just finding this slide. Yeah, we can have the same type of approach with chemically stimulated sweat when we combine the iontophoresis system with the microfluidic system. So it's actually a great question. We have now stimulation of sweat all around these inlets, and then you have constant flow of sweat as we would have during exercise. This is a stimulated sweat, mimicking the exercising one. Yeah, another, yeah, cool. I had a slide.
Thank you for the really insightful
Sure.
talk. So I'm wondering, how long do you have to wear these sensors before it starts to give out information? Or do you foresee it in a way to be used also in emergency medical situations?
Yep. Yeah. Depends. For example, when you are for exercising, how long does it take for the sensor to have information, right? As soon as you start sweating. When you start doing exercise, it usually takes 10 minutes for you start sweating. So I would say that the delay is 10 minutes. When you're doing this type of approach that you actually stimulate sweat, you need to do the stimulation for 5 minutes. So this would be the time lag that you would have between your sensor and the analyte measurement. And then I would say that 5 minutes is okay for real time compared with the weeks that you send like the sample to the lab, for example. It's pretty much like a real time. When you do the finger prick, the time lag between you eat the food and the glucose reaching out your blood is about 15 minutes. Plus another 5 minutes of iontophoresis, you have 20 minutes of time lag. Compared with the 15 that you already have, it's not that much. I would say that's pretty much real time. Nice, thank you.